Hi, I'm Greg Smith from SlopeFlyer.com, and you've been watching a demonstration of the capabilities of Leading Edge Gliders PSS slope planes. Power Scale Soaring, or PSS, is one of the most exciting forms of RC slope soaring. The models range from World War II aircraft and modern military jets to civilian planes and classic racers. Some of the best PSS planes on the market come from the workshop of Jack Cooper at Leading Edge Gliders. His EPP Warbirds combine the performance of glass ships with the durability of EPP, making an LEG PSS plane a staple in many slope pilots' hangars. While this video concentrates on the building of one of Jack's 60-inch PSS Warbirds, many of the tips and techniques are applicable to other EPP planes as well as model building in general. So join me for an informative look at a master at work.
Hi, I'm Jack from Leading Edge Gliders. What we're going to be doing today is going through a standard PSS foaming warbird build. This is going to be showing you the tips and techniques that I use to construct one of my kits. What we're going to be building today is a 60-inch P51D Mustang. The kit, I'm just going to kind of quickly go through everything you're going to get, but just putting out here in front of us, the wings, ailerons, all hardware, fuselage, pre-cut tails, clear canopy. Everything that's going to come in your kit is 100% hardware and items needed to build the plane. All you're going to need are finishing materials and tools. And we're going to be going through everything you're going to need as we go. So it's ready to start. First thing I'm going to do, I like to build the wings first, so we'll get going on that. First thing that I like to do is I like to put together a spar. One of the things you'll find in my kits is the spars have a scarf joint cut in them for two reasons. First of all, to establish the correct dihedral, and second of all, scarf joint is probably the strongest joint you're going to get out of two single pieces of wood. What you'll be able to find on a scarf joint, the top always goes on, the small piece is always going to go on top of the other. And what that'll do is that will establish your correct dihedral. You'll see here in the first camera how it bends. Second camera, you'll see where I put them together. So we need to glue this up. All right, what you're going to need, you need some clamps. I like to use thick CA. It works really well. It's quick, has a good bonding strength. I like thick CA just because it's quick. So put a generous bead of thick CA on the joint itself. Get it in with your finger, nice and smooth. Then go ahead and get these pieces put together. Line up the X's. If you have it on a flat table, your spar will be straight. Go ahead and get it clamped. Flip it over. Clamp the back. Being that I don't like to wait too long, I just kick it a couple times. Let it set for a second. It'll be done. That's about all it needs. It's not at full strength yet, but it's together. It'll hold for what we're going to do. And by the time everything's done, everything will be fully cured. Normally, the kit's going to have a doubler. This kit, for this client, he flies on some pretty high extreme, high speeds, some pretty big lift places. We're going to be putting in a third spar just to completely strengthen the center of the wing. What you want to do for strength on the scarf is you want to oppose the scarf joints when you put this together. So the bottom one has the main scarf. You want to oppose it. In other words, you can see here that these two pieces are going to oppose each other, and you want to just do that on both pieces as we put them together. What I do is I'll put it together here, make a mark, that way I know as I put it back together I'm doing it properly. Same thing as we put the spar together. What I like to do, I get the center lines lined up where the center of the joint comes together. I just put a mark at the end so I know where to put my CA. That way I don't have to put too much or too little. Go ahead and get it laid on the spar. Same thing, put a fairly generous amount. Don't be stingy with the glue. Glue is what holds it together. Go ahead and wipe it down nice and smooth. The thick CA, you have to work pretty quick, but you do have a little bit of working time before it'll set. So if you do it quickly, it'll work just fine. If you choose to use wood glue or some other type of regular glue that will take a little bit more time to set up, it's just fine. Like I said, just for purposes of speed, I like to use the thick CA. It's just a matter of getting it clamped together. Make sure that you hold these spars tight to each other. Okay, got the bottom, throw a couple across the top. Make sure that it's tight all the way. You feel with your finger whether or not it's fully lined up. You can adjust it even with the CA a little bit. Make it perfect. So come back and kick it. We'll just give it a second. It'll be ready to go. We'll get the tripler on. And you can feel the CA's taking hold. Same thing on the tripler. Making sure that we oppose it. Our X's will all line up. Set it down. Get a mark so we know where to put our CA. That's it. Spar's built. Obviously, if you're using wood glue, you're going to take a little bit more time to do it. But ultimately, the goal is to get everything put together nice and tight. You see, it's all tight, it's very strong. Next step, we're going to prepare the wing cores to accept the extra spar slots. Okay, now that we've given the spar just a couple minutes to set up, to allow the CA that's inside to cure, we're going to get our cores ready to accept them. Go ahead and open them up. First thing you're going to do is take the spar. It doesn't matter whether you put the long spar or the short doubler to the front of the rear. You know, for weight reasons, I'm going to put the spar to the front part of the wing. But the way we want to line this up, go ahead and push your main spar down into the slot. Look down here and just eyeball to make sure that that you've got your long spar, main spar, lined up with you know, the spar slot on the back side here. Also, mark the center section of this and line that up exactly with the root of the wing. Once it's there, just take a pin and trace it out. Trace out the doubler and the tripler, for instance, in this case. Once that's done, what we do is set it aside. We want to go ahead and cut the rest of this foam out. All right, the step that we're going to do here, I like these Stanley blades. It's a 9mm snap knife, has some flexibility, and what this is going to allow us to do is to get down inside the channel And as you can see, this blade will bend. If you put too much pressure, it'll break, but you put just enough pressure, you'll be able to bend it down in there. We're going to be able to cut a perfect 90-degree angle and remove this foam out. That way our spar sits in there perfectly flush. That's the way I want to do it. Also, a tip when you're using these, and I'll show you right here on this wing core, when you're cutting your slot, hold the blade at a 45-degree angle to the foam, and it'll draw through. Nice and neat. If you hold it straight, even though it's a brand new blade, you can see what it'll do. So you want to draw the foam through at an angle. Your blade will come nice and clean. Another trick here, on your line, take the outside of the line. You do not want the spar to be tight. What that will cause the wing to do is it'll cause a flat spot on top of the airfoil. That's obviously not something we want. So holding your blade 90 degrees up, work it down in, and then draw it back at the 45-degree angle, trying to estimate the depth that you're trying to cut. Now, as we do this, if you're a little bit big, it's okay. Again, just to reiterate, you do not want to be tight. Go ahead and make your cut. Follow the line out. And then at this point, the first step of removing that foam is done. Now comes the point where we're going to take this blade, we're going to set it down inside the spar channel, using it at a 45-degree angle. We're going to draw it back through, bending the blade down. And I'll go ahead and start with the small one. You put it down in, work it in a back and forth motion. As we do this, work it back and forth just till you know you've hit the line that you've cut. Draw it back, take this piece out, and you can see that it's nice and square. And that's key for having the spar go in and sit flush. Work it in, draw it back. Put it down in the channel, work it in, draw it back, same thing. Okay, this side's done. We're going to remove this other side here. Work it down, keeping it flush. Draw it back. Nice and square comes out. And the final piece. At this point, I'm going to show here what you have. In your channel, you should have it nice and flat and square to accept the spar. Doing the other side, just flip your spar around. Drop. You can see here that this is dropped partially in the spar slot. That way I know it's perfectly lined up. Check to make sure that the center spar lines up with the pre-cut spar slot. I know a lot of guys have tried to use soldering irons and other things to remove this, and I've tried a couple different methods, and this by far is the quickest and most efficient way I've been able to find, along with getting the best result. Okay, piece came out. Let's see how it fits. Beautiful. You can see it's not tight, which we're not going to deform the airfoil once it's dropped down in there and glued in place. So at this point, the next step is going to be, due to the fact the P51 has a straight wing and it's cut in 4 panels, we need to go ahead now and we're going to be attaching these 2 panels together and getting them lined up so that way we can go ahead and drop the spar in. On a normal, any other kit, you don't have a straight wing, so this step is only valid on the P51s. Quick and easy way of doing this with a permanent bond is 3M Super 77 multi-purpose adhesive. Probably any spray adhesive will work. One of the great parts about EPP is it's pretty well chemically inert to any spray adhesive out there. You don't need to use the old style 3M spray. Nothing really hurts this. So all you want to do is get a nice even coat on both wing halves here. And you do want to set these aside though for about 10 minutes. So spray the other side. And at this point, we can just go ahead and set them aside. You got to wait a couple minutes, let the adhesive dry, and then you'll be on to the next step. Okay, what we can do while the wing cores the wings are drying, so we can join those two panels together, we can go ahead and put together our sub-trailing edge. What you're going to use in the kit, you're going to have the 1/8 by 3/8 piece of basswood or spruce, and you're going to have the 1/4 inch by 3/8 inch balsa. The reason these are put together is for two reasons. First of all, to give some structural rigidity to the trailing edge of the wing. That's why we use the basswood, and we go ahead and marry that to the balsa. And the balsa, we use that. We're going to use a CA hinge, and it allows you to cut into and put a CA hinge into it. So go ahead and get that done. What I use on this, I use thin CA, and what I do is making sure your work surface is flat. I bring the two pieces together, just hold them by hand, line up one end, pinch them tight with your fingers and put a small amount of CA, making sure not to get on yourself so you don't become part of your work. Hold it for a second, kick it. Make sure you don't kick her on yourself with CA. If you've done it before, you'll understand why. It hurts. And then you can begin, at this point, once you have the end stuck together, you can begin to work it down a little bit at a time. I usually go about 5 or 6 inches at a time, pulling it tight together, holding it, and then kick it. You got to make sure you move it so you don't stick to the table. It's a good possibility. The other thing you want to do as you're putting it together, you want to check to make sure that you're not gluing it together in crooked. As these can slide back and forth on each other, you can get it to slide. You want to make sure that you keep everything just perfectly straight. So you can tell that just by the way you hold these together and glue them, that you're going to be straight. Now the reason I draw my fingers back and forth across here is to make sure that every part is sealed and that there's not going to be any gaps in the wood. This part I flip it over and just run a bead right down the seam. Now we've given them about 10 minutes. We need to go ahead and, you can see it's dry to the touch. It's ready to put together. What we want to do is just basically, I'm going to take these things off where they're taped together. I line them up by hand, just making sure the cores are lined up exactly. I line the trailing edge up and then just stick them together so everything matches. And if all is done right, spar slot all lines up. It's good to go. We now have a single wing panel. Same thing on the other side. Now at this point, it's going to be just like any other wing, and we're going to go ahead and put these spars in. I have my own method of doing it. A lot of guys like to use goop. One thing to not use, do not use polyurethane glue. It is completely based on expansion. It's extremely strong. It's easy to work with as far as sanding, but what you're going to happen, to give you an example, on polyurethane glue, you're going to get your spar in your channel, and as that glue expands, it's going to push it out and take your airfoil and do that. I have seen many times where guys use the polyurethane glue and the top of their wing will be flat from 2 inches in all the way to the trailing edge. Will be perfectly flat, and they'll have a nice airfoil shape on the bottom of their wing. It's not really good for flight performance, and at that point you build another wing. So yeah, you can fly them inverted, as Greg was illustrating there, but yeah, it's not really the best thing to do. Two ways of doing it. I'm going to show you the way I prefer to do it, and I prefer to use hot glue, again, because I don't like to sit around and wait for something to be done. You could use goop. Any type of goop will work. Household goop, marine goop. Two different types of hot glue guns that are available. I got two of them plugged in here. The one you want to use, obviously they're both hot glue gun, but you want to use one that's specifically a low temperature hot glue gun. I mean, at the nozzle you can actually touch and not get burned. If you were to hold it for a long time, of course you will, but in the short term. But there's a reason you use the low temp. The formula is fluid at a temperature that's safe to use on the foam. I'm going to give you an example here just on one of the wing beds. I'll flip one over. Well, leave it like this. If I take this nozzle, right now the glue is completely fluid. You can take this nozzle, set it on the foam. The glue will come out completely fluid, but it's at a temperature that's below the melting point of the foam. You're not going to destroy the product that you're working on. And you can see here, it's not harming the foam in any way. This here is a regular hardware store, Home Depot type of hot glue gun. Its melting temperature is approximately 380 to 400 degrees. The melting temperature of the foam is about 260. To give you an example of what it does, I'm putting the same pressure I was on the other gun, and it just melts a hole right into it. I mean, it'll melt completely through the core if I hold it here, and just leave a nice hole in no time at all. So, recommendation: go out and buy a low temperature hot melt glue gun, or use Goop. Goop works really well. It holds really well. The only difference is you're going to be waiting overnight for your spar to set, as compared to having instant results. So here's next step. What we're going to do is we're going to trim the spar to length. We're going to go ahead and put the spar into place, lining up the center. On the wings, for durability, what I do is I'll trim off approximately 3/4 of an inch of the tip of the spar off. That way I have a complete foam tip. And the reason for that is when we have hard landings, you crash, you tumble in, it prevents the spar from popping out of that wing section. So you'll be able to have a cleaner wingtip for a longer amount of time. So what I do, I just mark off approximately 3/4 of an inch, and I'll do that on each side, and then take it over to the bandsaw and knock it off real quick. Okay, now we've trimmed the edges off. That way when it's sitting in here we have approximately 3/4 of an inch. It doesn't need to be exact, but you just want to make sure you do have foam on the tip. Okay, at this point what I like to do, make sure you have plenty of extra glue sticks available. Once you begin to use hot glue to put your spar in, what you're going to be doing, when you start, you commit, there's no turning back. That is an advantage of Goop. You have time if there's a problem. You can fix it. You have time to correct, pull it out, re-goop it or whatever you need to do. Once you become comfortable with using hot glue guns, though, it's very quick, very efficient, and you'll have this wing spar put in here in about 5 minutes. So I have my gun ready. I have my spar set where it's handy. What I'm going to be doing is laying in the glue, setting in the spar. I'm going to set the spar in about 1/2 inch shy of where it's supposed to go into. And then once it's down and pressed, I slide it forward, and what that does is it's going to take the wavy action of the glue that I put in there and pull it all the way across, and that way you have a solid joint all the way across this wing. If you don't know what that is, that's a tornado warning test. So like I said, when you start this, you commit to it, you're off and running. Here we go. What I do, when I lay this down, I'm just going to put it in a wavy line all the way down here to the tip. Here we go. Oh, another thing that's extremely important I almost overlooked. When you do this, you have to glue them down in the beds. Make sure that this wing is setting properly in the bed. What you're going to do at that point, you're going to make sure that this wing is perfectly straight, and you won't have any warps or twists in it that way. So, all right, as we go. Putting the hot glue gun in the channel, putting it in a wave as you go. Set the spar in about a 1/2 inch shy, in, slide it forward, put pressure on it for about 10 seconds. So once we have the pressure on it, we know our glue's starting to set. At this point we can go ahead and finish mounting the spar the rest of the way in here. You're going to take the hot glue gun, being that you can take the nozzle and put it here up against the foam where it's safe. Take the nozzle and stick it down in between the foam and the spar, squeezing a little bit out, and just draw it back along to fill up any gap, making sure as you go you put pressure on the spar so you will not deform the spar by pushing it out and having expansion. Any extra hot glue is going to pop up through the top. It's not going to come out and deform the wing. Now with the low temp sticks, when you do this, what pops up, it'll sand off fairly easily if you want to sand it. If not, as it begins to pop up, you can just take your finger and run it down, and it'll take the excess glue off and it'll rub right off your fingertips. And that's it. This spar is mounted. It's in. Everything will be perfectly straight. As you can see here, the airfoil has got its continual shape. You see here in the back, it's not deforming the airfoil at all. It's nice and round. The bottom, pretty well flat, and that's an RG14 airfoil, is fairly flat on the bottom. So this side is done. On to the next. We'll prep it. Okay, we've got our spar put in one side of the wing. What we need to do, due to the fact of the dihedral angle of the spar, we're going to take this out of the bed real quick. Just take a sanding block, any sanding block will do. Hold it at the edge of your table and just give it a couple swipes back and forth. What you're doing here is just allowing the two wing halves to come together nice and flush. It doesn't need a lot. That's about all it needs right there, and it'll be perfectly ready to go. The only difference between what we did here the first time and this is as we slide this in, we're just going to make sure as we slide it in and put it together, we're not going to put a twist in it. We're going to make sure that these halves come together and everything is just nice and straight. And that's the goal. Put it together so everything lines up. Okay, we've sanded our root down. Now the angles match, so our dihedral will be nice and tight. Again, what we're going to be doing, we're going to be laying in our glue channel, setting this in about a 1/2 inch shy, pulling it tight. Make sure our wing panels are lined up exactly straight. Put some pressure on the wing. Hold it for about 10 seconds. And it's set. At this point we can take our nozzle, stick it in between our two halves, run a bead of glue down this half here, and a bead of glue down the back of it. Only takes about 10 seconds for this glue to start to set up where it doesn't want to move very well. And you'll be able to hold it. It'll go right where you want it to do. Okay, this panel is pretty well set. We'll come back here, stick the nozzle in the center section, and just run a bead right down the top of the wing here. And we're set. This wing panel is now put together. We're ready to, at this point, go ahead and put the sub-trailing edge on and get ready for that. Okay, now that the wing's glued up, the spar's in, it's at this stage that I take these little strings off the EPP. What works really well is another block EPP, lightly rubbed over. We'll take the majority of them off. You can then flip it over to the sandpaper side. We'll get quite a few more, and then just end up pulling the rest off with your fingers. We want to make sure at this point we're going to be putting on the trailing edge that it's nice and clean. You don't have to worry about the entire wing. We're going to take care of that in the next step. I don't like to do things over if I don't have to, so I just leave them on until I have to sand everything at once. So you can see right here now the trailing edge is nice and clean all the way across. What I use to put my sub-trailing edges on, I like to use 3M Super 7 spray. Again, goop would work well, taped in place. Again, I don't like to wait. I want to get going. So what I do here, I take my sub-trailing edges, I set the wing down, I just roughly line them up where they're supposed to be. I get a rough guess, and I'm just going to trim them with the razor knife, so that way they're at the proper angle. So in the center, they'll line up nice and neat. Got that side done. Okay, they're now ready to spray. When you spray these with 3M, at this point, you want to be generous with your spray. Don't be afraid to put any on. Actually, to the point that it starts to bubble is about where you want to spray. Hold it nice and close to the wood. All the way down, set it aside for a couple minutes. You see here, it actually is bubbling up. You can see there's a fairly large amount of glue on there. Again, goop will work just fine. Just taping it on and letting it sit overnight. If you're not in a hurry, you know, it's another good way of doing it. Also do that to the trailing edge itself. All right, now it's a matter of letting it sit for about 10 minutes. Okay, now these have set about 10 minutes. We're going to go ahead and set them on. Again, this is one of the steps here. As you commit to it, you commit to it. Line it up first time right. What I like to do, I'm putting it on. I like to line up the bottom due to the fact that this is an RG14 airfoil. The bottom is pretty well flat at this point. I'll set on the top to the right shape. Taking the piece of wood, lining it up at the center point, and then hitting it here, hitting it right lined up with the center, and then working it down a little bit at a time. As you can see here, as long as you're not sticking it down too hard, you can maneuver it. Once you press it down though, it will set, and the only way it's coming off is you're going to rip out the foam. So as long as you're gentle, you can get it right where you want it to go. Where I want it, go ahead and put a little pressure on it. It's set. As you can see, you can pull on it pretty hard. It's not going to come off. Same thing at the other side. Now that we have our sub-trailing edges, what we're going to do is prepare our trailing edge to accept the torque rod. What you want to do, once you have your torque rod and your sub-trailing edges, what I find works well for getting this channeled out and allowing your torque rod to go in nice and flush and quick and easy. Again, using the 9mm snap blade, I use this probably the most during anything as I do. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this, using my finger as a guide, I'm going to cut out a V channel in here, leaving approximately a 1/16 of an inch of the balsa on each edge. And just coming down, like I said, you don't want to do an extremely deep V channel. I just take it all the way through the foam. Okay, once this is out, here's what I use. This is just one of the cheap, inexpensive needle files that you can get out of any discount hardware store. The back end with the knurling on it works really well for just sanding this channel out and getting it open to accept the torque rod. The goal here is we want to get the torque rod just below flush, so that way when it's married onto the the sub-trailing edge, we don't have any gaps. You can see it just by sticking this in here, if it'll, where we're at. If you can then push it in with your fingers and then not see it, you're good. In this case, I need to just go a little bit more on the outside edge. Just a pass or two. And we're good. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and cut the notch. When these are centered here, we want to go ahead and cut the notch for our torque rod to be able to come back into. Again, this is just here, just a V-notch, taking it down until it meets the channel that you've cut out. Then your torque rod will just fit nice and neat right in here. When it's pressed in there, it should hold. It'll be very, very easy to move. So, full movement, no binding, it's exactly what we want. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get these right here glued into place. What I use, well, again, I just use thick CA. On the torque rod itself, there's a plastic sleeve. This plastic sleeve, what I do is I'll line it up so that on the threaded end side, I'm about 3/16 of an inch off where it's going to be popping out of the hole here. And that way, once I get it set in place, if I happen to have, as I'm adjusting the aileron on, if I need to move this in and out to get that aileron adjusted, I'll have the movement without binding on the sleeve that's already glued in place. So when that's where I want it to be, I go ahead and pull it out. I'm going to place, making sure I keep about a ½ an inch distance between each end of that sleeve. Couple drops of thick CA in the middle of this. You don't need a whole lot due to the fact that it's a tight fit, and the wood, when it's glued on to the sub-trailing edge, it's going to hold really well. Just need a little bit here. Go ahead and get it in place. Push it down in so it's beyond flush. We can still move this back and forth right where we want it to be. Let's go ahead and kick it. We'll do the same thing to the other side. I've already prepared it, so all we have to do is just finish cleaning it. Place the torque rod in, make sure we have that about that 3/16 of an inch. Fits nice and clean. We're going to get our CA in there, and then we're going to go ahead and get it kicked off so we don't have to wait. And these are ready to go on the airplane. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to be lining up at the bottom, just like I did here. I want this to be flat. The way I'm going to do that is by leaving it flush here on the table, holding the back end of the wing down. I'll be bringing these up just so they sit just like that. I'm going to use thick CA. What you're going to have here, if you want to or not, it really won't matter if you use thick CA. If you want to go ahead and sand it down just a bit to match. I just use thick CA and fill up the gap. It's just as strong because when it's taped and mounted onto the plane, it'll be a solid structure. So we'll go ahead and do it here. Now that we're ready to glue these on, again, I'm going to use thick CA, keeping in mind the entire time exactly where my sleeve starts and stops. You want to keep the thick CA or any type of CA about probably at least 1/4 of an inch, if not more, away from where the sleeve openings are. And the reason being is any type of bleeding, if you get the CA inside that sleeve, it's an instant bond. Throw it away, get another one, start over. So what I'm going to do here is that I leave this just a little bit up from the edge to make sure I'm not going over there. leaving it about a 1/4 inch from the edge here, making sure. And then here in the center, there's not going to be an issue with it bleeding over, so I go ahead and put some right here in the center also. This point, holding the wing, so the flat part of the bottom of the wing is flat on the table, holding the aileron or the subtrailing edge flat, bring it up onto it right in the center where it meets. Go ahead and kick it on the top and move it so that way you don't glue it to the table. This is a quick motion, but what you're doing is allowing the top to set up. You go ahead and turn it over, kick it on the bottom. Check to make sure that it all moves freely. It does. We're good. And what I'll do, because I didn't sand the small little area right here, I'm going to come back over now that it's set on here. And with some of the thick CA, I'm going to make sure that that gap's completely full. I'm just going to lay a small bead right along the edges. A small bead right here. And again, just kick that to make sure it doesn't want to bleed anywhere. This one here is done. On to the next one here, same thing. We're going to make sure it's held flat. We're going to be bringing it in, gluing it up on right up in place. Hold it in place, slide it up. Go ahead and kick it immediately and move it. And you can probably hear right there where it wants to just hold for a second. As long as you've got the thick CA and you're only going to allow it to sit on the table for 5 or 6 seconds, you're okay. You can move it. It'll break the bond free. Another way you could go ahead and avoid that is if you were to use wax paper. That would eliminate that. I don't use it just because I've done it a couple times now and I know to move it. Now that I'm done with that, I'll come back here and just redo the center section real good. Kick it down. I like to wipe this down, being that that's going to be on the bottom of the airfoil, and I got to sand it. And then come back on this side here and fill up any of that gap. As it kicks, just make sure it moves nice and free. The wing at this point, what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be moving on to installing the ailerons. The next step, what we're going to do now, we're going to go ahead and get our ailerons mounted onto the wing. We got them right here. First thing that we need to do is we need to go ahead and put a mark on the back side of our trailing edge. Have one of these little centering tools made by Great Plains, and it's just real simple. Goes over, twist it, it'll score a center line on it. Go ahead and do that. I like to twist it and then come back the other direction also. That way I'm assured if anything is off when I came across the first time, I'll get a nice line the second time. Should be able to see. Got a nice center line scored here. So, okay. Once the center line is scored, take the aileron. Doesn't matter which way you do, right or left. And what I do is I set the wing down flat. I lift up my torque rod. First of all, I put the torque rod in the center of the slot notch that I made. And I bring the aileron into the position just underneath the wing where I want it to sit. I like to have about a 1/16 of an inch gap between the trailing edge here and the aileron. And what I do at this point, I let it sit. I take a ruler and I set it here on the aileron. What I do is I'm going to mark out the spots where my hinges are going to go. Here we go. I like to go about an inch, inch and a quarter away from where the torque rod comes out. So I'll put a mark here on the aileron, a mark on the sub-trailing edge. I use CA hinges right here. CA hinges are 3/4 of an inch wide. So just make your mark 3/4 of an inch. And then all we have to do is just go down the line, make a couple marks. I like to come in about an inch from the outside edge. Again, just make your marks. And then just one in the center of that. So we have about 18.5, so 9 1/4 be the center mark. And there we go. I just got to do that for the other side. Oh, also a little quick tip I like to do. I like to write on my aileron once I got it marked, which one's right, and then up. That way I know. No need to mark the other one because you know what this one is already. Okay, now we have our spots for the hinges marked. And at this point, we're going to go ahead and bevel our ailerons. This is, you want a nice clean 45 bevel on them. That way you're going to be able to have full travel up and down along with the center hinge. So there's two ways of doing it. Some guys will use a block plane, put them down and use a block plane to do it. I personally don't like to do that. I just, again, think it just takes too much time. I just use a block, sanding paper, and just very quickly with some coarse grit sanding paper. Sanding at a 45-degree angle on the aileron is the best thing to do. And once you have it, you can go ahead and go across flat and straight. Go ahead and flip it. Once you have your 45s on, what you do, go ahead and get it set back up here. Now it's time to hinge. What I like to use the Great Plains slot machine. Mechanically, what it'll do is just use the jaws will come and oppose themselves and cut a nice clean slot through the balsa. Don't try to push it through the spruce. Doesn't have a real benefit as far as holding power. What I do here is, again, all I do is I hold the aileron so that way it's just in between my fingers, and I use this, and if it begins to poke through, in other words, if these blades drift as it's coming in, you'll be able to feel it underneath the balsa before it'll actually poke through, and you'll be able to back it off and then go ahead and redo it nice and straight. What I do, again, when I use this machine, I just hold the balsa in between my fingers. Let the machine do the majority of the work. You're going to just press it in till it bottoms out on the case. A tip, what you can do is take your razor knife and then just create a small flat spot right where that's going to go into, and that'll allow the blades to grab into the wood a little easier. I use my finger resting on the side of the blade as a guide to bring it in, so that way it doesn't wobble. You can see it won't cut yourself as long as you're not holding it right on the blades themselves. Once I get it scored, I just check to see that it's dead center, and then once I'm sure it is, I continue to go. And that's it, in and out. Okay, aileron's done. Now it's just a matter of doing the trailing edge. You just go right on the line. Once these are in place and cut, next thing I do is mark where my torque rod is going to go in to the wood. And what I do here, put the aileron where the marks line up, make a mark right here where the torque rod is going to go into the wood, and then hold it above where it's for approximate depth, so I have an idea when I'm drilling the hole. So all I do is just make a couple marks, and then again it's going to have a flat spot right here because we're going to drill that down in with the drill bit. I do this on a drill press. Now we're ready to go ahead and drill our holes for our torque rods. Use a 3/32 drill. What I do, I hold it, put the drill bit in between the marks, bring it up straight and level, Again, if you start to drift it side to side, you'll be able to fill before the drill bit actually comes through the wood. You'll be able to fill it underneath, be able to make any corrections at that point. So. I just use the sawdust on the drill bit to check to see my depth. So I need to go a little farther. And then once I'm there, all I do is I just move it back and forth a couple times to make sure it's opened up. Same thing on the other one. Okay, now we've got our holes drilled. We have our ailerons are hinged. Everything's ready to go ahead and apply these on. Doesn't matter which side you do first. I'm just going to go ahead and do the right side here first. I use a CA hinge. What I do is I take the hinge and I cut them in half. They don't need to be full length, full size, due to the fact that when I cover this plane, I'm going to cover it in Solartex and create a live hinge on both top and bottom with full span with Solartex. So just got to cut 3 of them here in half. And pretty much what the CA hinges are doing is holding the aileron in place until we get it covered. I mean, they do provide some strength, but the majority of the strength is going to come when we do the other thing. When I put the CA hinges in, I like to put them in the aileron first, and then I'm just going to test fit it before I actually epoxy it up and then glue it down in place. Here, where I talked about earlier, having your torque rod able to move back and forth, here's where that's going to come into play. I find it's a lot easier to go ahead and get these CA hinges started in the trailing edge stock if you're able to slide this back and forth in this motion. And as long as you have it available, you can do it. Starting towards you, and then just kind of work them in, a little bit at a time. And what I can see here is I've got to trim part of this. I've got to square it out a little bit more to get this to the proper same depth as the fixed trailing edge. I'll just take my razor knife and plane her down a little. See how it fits now. I'm almost there. I can actually see where I've got to go. Go ahead and just take it out. And now it comes in, matches up real nice. So at this point, what I'm going to do, go ahead and take it off, mix up a little bit of 5-minute epoxy. Get some epoxy inside our hole, get our torque rod glued into the trailing edge, pull it up into here, and then thin CA these hinges in place. It'll be done. We'll move on to the next side. You don't need a lot of epoxy here. A couple drops of 5-minute work well. Okay, what I like to do, take some of that epoxy, I like to drizzle it right over the hole and actually kind of force some on there and then put it right on the flat spot that I made behind. The other thing I like to do is just take some and actually put it on the torque rod itself. That way this won't have a chance of working its way free as the aileron moves back and forth. A little bit to the back of the torque rod, avoiding where it's going to go into the sleeve. Just making sure it's nice and clean there. At this point, we're ready to go ahead and slide her in place. And I can feel where the epoxy's in there. It's already giving me a little bit of tension. I'm going to have to force it up in, which is good. Make sure these are straight. and get it slid in there. Now you want about a 1/16 of an inch gap. Excuse me. That way you've got plenty of room for your Solartex to hinge down and touch itself. Also at this point, we're going to move these out so we have our approximate 1/16 of an inch gap in between our fixed trailing edge and our aileron. I can see everything's glued up. Everything's nice. All I want to do here, I like to take my razor knife just as a precaution and run it back in between where this is coming out, just to clean it out, just to make sure nothing in there is touching. Okay, now that we have our 1/16 inch gap all the way down, and about a 1/16 of an inch gap between our trailing edge and our aileron, just about 3 or 4 drops of thin CA on the CA hinge on each side. That'll lock this in place. Once it sets there, go ahead and flip it over. 3 or 4 drops on the bottom side. This one is done and mounted. To the next side. And the basic wing construction is done now. All we're going to have to do is trim the outside tips of the ailerons to the proper shape for a P51, and then we're going to go ahead and sand the unit. You probably have noticed I haven't done any sanding on this wing up until this point, and the reason is there's no use in sanding twice when you're going to do it all once in the end anyway, so you might as well make everything match up. If we were to pre-sand it and then we hinged and had a hinge even a 32nd of an inch off, it's going to show up. We're going to have to do it again. So might as well not waste our time. One thing we can do at this point too is now that the ailerons are hinged, you can see they work, you know, just they'll fall. You know, that means they're very free. I just take these when they're centered. I put a little smash mark on the balsa itself. That way I know exactly where to put a little V-notch. And I put another V-notch on the actual sub-trailing edge. That way I'll be able to get full travel. That's probably close to 70 degrees, which we'll never ever need, up and down. We're good. Okay, now got the bandsaw. I'm just going to go ahead and trim up the pieces off the edge of the trailing edge and get this shaped. And that's it, right there. P51 wingtips. Okay, now that we've cut the tips off to the proper shape, the only thing left to do before we sand and spackle this wing is take a couple pieces of the scrap foam that we cut out when we made our little slot here. And we're going to go ahead and just glue these into the tip to fill up that spot. Here, hot glue works just fine. Just need a little bit on the foam. A little bit here and there. I use the nozzle to actually spread it around just a bit. And stick it in place. Push it down. Leave it, and I'll come back and just trim it with a razor knife. And ready for sanding. Now, when I sand the wing, I think you may have noticed I didn't take every last little bit of the string off. This is the point that I'm going to do that. A lot of times I just use my nail, grab it and pull it off. The sandpaper will take a lot of it off. I try not to go overly aggressive on the top of the wing, especially up here. I don't want to deform the airfoil. And so I try to pull the majority of them off. You want every one of them off ultimately because they will show through on the covering. I don't think it will have any adverse effect on flight performance. It's not going to look as good as you could have made it. So just pull them off. Once you're satisfied you've got them all, go ahead and sand. The way I sand these, I like to take the wing, and what I'll do is I'll put it right up against the edge of my table. That way I can take my sanding block and I can hold it down over the edge, and because of the bevel of the aileron, I'm not going to put a flat spot up on the wing itself. What I'm doing is I'm just going to sand this into a nice blended shape into the wing, trying to keep, from what I know is the actual RG14 airfoil, try to keep as much of that shape as possible. Again, I like to sand in a 45-degree line. I will sand forward a little, but I try to avoid it as much as possible. This here is 80 grit to start with, and then I'll drop down to something with like 120. When I'm doing this, also, I pay just a lot of attention to not get into the foam. This is pretty well trying to just get the high spot off where the wing is, where the trailing edge stock is squared. You know, again, if you're comfortable using a block plane, you know, as long as you're doing it carefully, a block plane would probably do this job just the same. I just personally prefer the sandpaper. When I start getting too much dust and I can't see what's going on, I'm going to go ahead and vacuum it out of there. If you have small gaps, or you can feel any of the ridge still, you're going to want to take some of that off. I like to just eyeball it and see how it is. Sometimes it's right where you want it to be, and you're just in a dimple in the foam. And when we spackle that, the spackle is going to fill that void, and it's going to just be a nice, smooth, continual airfoil. Looking at it down the line this time, I think I need to go a couple more passes, and it'll be right there. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and do the top side of the other, flip it over, do the bottom side the same, cleaning up around the spar, and then I'll begin to work around and show how to round the leading edges. Now that we've got our trailing edges and aileron sanded down, we're going to be moving on to sanding down the spar. But one thing I want to mention, pay special attention when sanding down your trailing edges and your aileron. What you want to do is you're going to want to sand this trailing edge and aileron down to about a 32nd of an inch to reduce drag, make it a little bit more aerodynamic. Being at a 32nd of an inch compared to a 16th of an inch is pretty much what a standard aileron is not going to be any more stronger, any weaker. So onto the aileron, or the main spar we go. What I like to do, I like to set it on the edge of the table to support well. And this is the same basic thing here. It's sanding it down. You're going to get some of this hot glue come up that we didn't wipe down all the way. And sanding this down smooth with the surface of the foam. Now when you're doing the main spar, sanding it down to the surface of the foam, not only are you going to hear, but you'll also feel as you come from just hitting wood down to foam. What it'll do, it'll stop moving from fairly free and easy moving when it's just hitting the wood to be a little grabby on the foam. So you'll know when you're there, and at that point you'll be able to just go ahead and move on. And we're just going to continue this all the way across the wing. Now that we've got our spar sanded down flush with the foam, at this point what we're going to do is I like to round the leading edges off and go ahead and round the tips and get those finished shape. A couple tips on doing this. First of all, I'm using 80 grit sandpaper. You can use 120, might be a little easier. 80 grit works really, really well. The only thing that you've got to take into consideration when doing this is be very gentle with the foam, and I'm going to get into that more on shaping the fuselage. But at this point, what I like to do is I like to start with just a little bit of the balsa and the aileron, getting it round to begin with. So I have a general shape to start with, and then going down or up, depending if I'm doing the bottom or the top side, I just like to drag the sandpaper over at with pretty much just its own weight and pressure to come across and begin to get this foam shape. If you go at it aggressively, what will happen, no matter if you use a lighter grit sandpaper or not, you're going to get your foam to tear. So what you want to do, like I said, again, just going over it. If you're doing the top, going down lightly, and just begin to shape it over a little bit at a time to a nice round shape. If by any chance a cell does pull out, it's not a big deal. We're going to go ahead and spackle it. Just do everything you can to not do it. Also, another tip as we're doing this, as you go ahead and get everything rounded off, at this point, go ahead and just take your sandpaper and just lightly go over the entire wing, basically just putting a scuff on it. What that'll do is it's going to get this ready to take the spackle that's going to be coming. Be very careful not to remove any of the cells. We don't want to deform the airfoil. We just want to scuff it. Okay, at this point, we've got the leading edges rounded over. Just another quick note on the leading edge. Make sure you round the leading edge to a nice, round shape. Anytime you're going to put a point, you're not going to gain speed. What you're going to do is you're going to make the plane pitch sensitive. You're not true to the airfoil. The airfoil is round. Go ahead and make it round. Plus, it's easier to cover that way. But, okay, now this wing at this point is going to be ready to spackle. With one difference, this wing has been requested by the customer to have a removable wing. So I'm going to go ahead and go through the point and show you guys how we do a removable wing. And it's pretty basic. A few more steps, we'll be done and ready to spackle this one though. Okay, what I do when I make a removable wing, I flip it upside down, and I'm going to use just a small piece of 1/8 inch plywood, 1 inch by about 2 inches, and I'm going to draw an outline. I'm going to embed this right here in the front of the wing. And what I'm going to do after I embed it, I'm going to go ahead and lay a strip of glass and epoxy across the center section here about 4 inches. And that's serving two purposes. It's going to lock this plate in place, but it also is going to be going over the balsa trailing edge, and that's going to allow me to go ahead and drill through the center there and have a hard point for the mounting bolt to rest up against there as well as here. Okay, let's go ahead and get this started. Now I'm going to bring this so we could see. I'm going to bring this right up to the edge of the foam on the P51. The P51, due to the strake, the front edge is cut in a blunt edge. That way it fits up in the fuse properly. It'll be the proper length. So I'm just going to set it in here. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered. I'm just eyeballing it though as close as I can get. I'm just drawing an outline mark on the foam. Now that I've got my outline mark, I'm going to take my razor knife. In a similar fashion as to what I did mounting the wing spars, I'm just going to take it, holding it at a 45-degree angle. I'm going to pull back and cut approximately 1/8 of an inch down in depth. And in the same fashion, taking this up where it's bendable and coming in and just begin to slice it out carefully. Not going too deep. I'd rather go a little shallow at first and then adjust it down with small steps instead of going in too deep the first time. I'm going to go ahead and set the plate in just to see how close I am. And I can see I've got to go down just a little bit more. Now, to me, that's looking pretty flat and pretty close. Set it in here, and it is now flush. The only thing that's not quite flush is where this is going to sit right at the bottom of the fuse. I'm going to go ahead and sand this off after it's glued in place and bring it flush to the rest of the wing. At this point, we're ready to glue. We now have the plate. It's fitted. Time to glue it in. I'm going to go ahead and use the low temperature hot glue. And as you can see, the nozzle's at full temperature. It doesn't burn the foam. Be generous. Again, you could use goop. I would, stay away from Gorilla Glue or any other type of polyurethane glue just because of the expansion issue. You don't want to put any warps in the wing at all. So here we go. Like I said, be generous with it. And it's a good thing to squish it out. You can always sand it off or rub off the extra. You can't put anything more underneath. go ahead and just squish it all out to make sure you have a real nice seal underneath. Hold it for, you know, the 10 seconds or so, and we can just wipe the extra off here. The low temperature stuff is not bad. You know, it's a little warm, but it doesn't burn. It's not anything like the hot melt stuff. If you're using a hot glue gun at all with the regular temperature, don't do that. It'll peel your skin off. So this stuff here, you know, it's at about 200 degrees, so it's warm, but it'll just rub right off. So, okay, we've got the plate in place. A couple licks of sandpaper over the top, and this will be ready to glass. That's about all we need right there. We just want to get that nice and round to the bottom of the airfoil. At this point, I like to mix my epoxy in Dixie cups or some other type of small plastic cup. The reason, because I can throw it away real easy. Got a couple pieces of fiberglass. If you were to order a removable wing kit from me, you're going to have the plate and the fiberglass in the kit. You know, obviously you're going to supply the epoxy. 30-minute epoxy, finishing resin are probably what most guys are going to end up using. I use 5-minute epoxy because I've done it a few times. I'm usually really quick with it. Plus, again, I don't like to wait when I'm doing these. I want to have this done, and I want to get out and go fly and move on to the next airplane. So what I do is I pretty well just roughly center this piece of glass and get it about where it's going to be sitting. Take my pin, make a couple marks so I know where to lay my epoxy down. What I like to do, I'm going to mix up enough epoxy to first brush it down onto the foam, into the balsa trailing edge area and everything, and just get a layer of epoxy here. Get the glass down on it, and then I'm going to take it, I want to have some more in there to get it up on top, and then go ahead and use an epoxy brush and get it brushed out onto it, and then it'll pretty well self-level. As long as we can do that in about 2 minutes, it'll become, it's still fluid, gravity will take effect, it'll make it nice and smooth. Then when we spackle it, it'll be perfectly smooth. Here's a tip when you're doing epoxy. I like to use a digital scale. Put the Dixie cup on and go ahead and turn it on, and it'll calibrate it with the scale on. And that way, I'll take it from ounces to grams. And when I'm doing a large amount, you know, more than just a couple small dabs at a time, I'll just squeeze out my epoxy until I'm about half of what I want, and whatever that measurement is, just when I'm doing the other half of the epoxy, take it to double that number. That way you know you've got a proper mixture, and your epoxy's not going to cure and be soft and you know, never get to the stage you want it to be. So right now I'm at 20 grams total. I'm about a quarter of the cup, or approaching a quarter of the cup. And I'm going to take it up to 25 grams. There we go. It just clicked to 25. Put the other half of my resin in there. Take it up to 50 grams. You know, this is probably the most exciting part. This is actually so much more fun. I'm even considering just foregoing ever flying an airplane again just to mix epoxy, because it is, it's exciting. Now, when you work with this much epoxy, I like to have a pretty solid stir stick. I've just got an extra piece of trailing edge stock here of the spruce. You want to mix it up pretty thoroughly. And then from this point that we've mixed it, everything is a commitment. It's don't slow down. Now, if you're using 30-minute epoxy, you're going to have a little bit more time to work with it. Just depends on the speed you want to go. And I can tell by the color I'm where I want to be. I'm going to get just about a little bit over half onto the foam. I just use this to quickly spread it around. get it generally where I want it to go, and I'm going to finish it up with the brush here. Okay, now that I've got a generous amount of epoxy on, I'm going to go ahead and get the glass set down and get it tapped down really quick to wet it out, get it stuck. And get the rest of the epoxy on before it starts to kick. Now, some guys might think this is kind of going overboard on the epoxy. It maybe is, but it's just what I've found works, and epoxy's cheap. As you get these stragglers here, just get rid of them. Okay, it's pretty well on there. I'm just going to finish tapping it out. Now, it's just a matter of working it with the brush, work the little air bubbles out, and getting it smooth. What I'm going to do, because I'm going to be laying glass on the top side, I'm just going to be beginning to roll it over the edge here, and I'm just going to let gravity take it down. Before it fully cures, I'm going to trim it with any pair of scissors, and then it'll be ready to have the glass from the top laid over and overlap it. Now, at this point, it's pretty well a hands-off thing. A couple final, movements of the brush. Let gravity do its thing. Let it begin to just let the epoxy go fluid. It'll smooth it out. And like I said, we're going to be spackling this wing anyways, so the ridge between the glass line here and the actual foam, we're going to be putting the spackle down. It's going to blend nicely together. We're going to get just a perfectly smooth wing here. Where a couple of these drips went out here, I'm just going to smooth them out. We let this set about 5 minutes. It's warm, it's kicked. It's not fully cured yet, but it's to the point where we can cut it nice and clean, and it's not going to move on us at all. I should also mention, when working with epoxy, you need to have it at a warmer temperature. If you're trying to work with epoxy in a room that's 50 degrees, it's probably not going to be fluid enough to, well, first of all, ever come out of the bottle, and second of all, it won't want to cure. You need to be somewhere probably above 65 degrees. 70 or 80 degrees is probably ideal. You'll be able to cure, and it'll kick in the time that it's supposed to. It won't take days, or even weeks, or not curing at all. So, okay, get this. I'm just going to use the same razor knife I've been using, and I pull the glass tight and just begin to cut it right against the foam. Being careful not to cut your finger on the bottom side. This blade's been used a lot. Snap it off, go to the next spot. Makes all the difference in the world. Okay, so we got it trimmed up here in the front now. Carefully in the back. We don't want to affect the trailing edge at all. But use the trailing edge obviously as your guide. And draw the knife through at a 45-degree angle, and you'll get a nice clean cut. Now we've got this trimmed up. Go ahead and flip it. We're going to duplicate what's up on, or duplicate on top what we've done on the bottom, with one exception. We're going to cut a small square around where the torque rods go to allow them to go. Some guys will want to cut two small individual circles, lay it over, and that's fine. I just personally just cut a small little square. That'll lay over, and you know, I just make sure I don't get any epoxy again in the spots we want these to be just perfectly free. So what I kind of do, I lay the glass on top, again looking to make sure it's pretty close to center, and by the nature of glass, I just kind of give it a little wiggle. It'll leave a couple small marks right where the torque rods are. Using a sharp razor knife, or if you would prefer, probably a sharp pair of scissors, I'm just going to cut, let's see here, I'm going to go ahead and cut out this rectangle, pressing down hard on the glass to make sure that it won't want to separate on me. I just cut a nice clean rectangle. And then just trim up any pieces of glass that didn't want to come through. Just go ahead and test fit and make sure it's big enough, which it is. And we're going to go ahead and take our pin, mark the basic outline, make sure we're centered so you can see where to lay your epoxy. And at this point, we're going to follow the exact same steps we did on the bottom. The only thing, we're going to make sure we don't put any epoxy in this square, which just kind of put a small mark here. And in this area, we're going to make sure it's completely open. So that way, as we get this piece of glass brushed down on there again, we don't want to bind up our control surfaces at all. Okay, now we have the center section's glassed over. Still have full aileron movement. Time to spackle. Everything's been sanded, top and bottom. It's all ready, and here we go. What I like to do on spackle, before anything gets laid on, I like to take just regular cheap masking tape, and I'm going to run a strip across the opening of the aileron hinge, and I'm going to spackle right up to the tape. And what that's going to allow me to do is, when it's all done, I'm going to have a nice clean line, and I'm not going to have to try to clean it out of the joint. So I'll do that to all 4 hinge lines. Okay, it's time to put the spackle on. Now, we don't use it just any type of spackle. You need a lightweight spackling compound. Doesn't really matter what brand. There's DAP, Red Devil. Custom Building Products is just what I get because it's readily available at my home improvement store. I buy it here in the gallon size, but you can buy it in smaller sizes. The main thing is it's lightweight, and this stuff, when it dries out, for whatever reason, the chemical compound in it, it'll remain flexible, and it doesn't like to crack. Even when it's on a semi-flexible surface like the EPP, it'll remain intact. Also, just so you know, the spackle should look and feel kind of like a thick whipped cream. Almost no weight to it, but it goes in. There's a couple different ways of laying it down on the wing. My preferred way is a little messy, and I do it for a reason though. I'll just grab it with my hand and force it in. What I want to do is I want to physically put as much pressure as I can on the wing without trying to break it, to force the spackle into the cells of the EPP, so I create a mechanical bond. As it dries, it's going to harden into the cells, so when I sand it back off smooth, I have a solid bond on it. So here goes. I just grab a handful and push it down in, and you see I try to work it in right up to the tape. Try not to get any back onto your ailerons. It really doesn't need to be there. You've already sanded them smooth. On the glass, go ahead and put some over on top of that too. You'll notice as you rub this in, it might appear to release a little bit of moisture on it, and that's fine. EPP is cured It's done wet anyways, so it's got water on it all the time when it's being made. Once I have it on there, what I do is exactly this. I spread it around. I'm going to put it back here to blend in where the line of the fiberglass. I just spread it around. If it looks kind of like frosted cake or bad stucco or something, that's just fine. A lot of guys like to come over it with a card or some type of plastic or a spatula or something to smooth it out, and that's fine. But I would rather put on one thick coat instead of put on multiple coats where I've done it too thin. I just want to get it done and over with. Like I said, get on to the next project, the next step. So I'm going to put it on nice and thick. I mean, not overly thick where it's not going to dry, but where I know I'm covering every imperfection that I want to fill in one coat. Begin to push it in around the edges. Over to the next side. All right, and that's about it right there. That's where I'm going to take this. At this point, it's going to need about 15 or 20 minutes to kind of skin up. Once it has a skin built up, at that point I can flip it over safely without pulling it off or just leaving it smeared on the top of the table. I'll do the top, set it aside. Tomorrow we'll sand it, get it taped, covered, get it ready for paint. It'll go fairly quickly from this point. It'll only take a couple minutes to sand it down. This stuff sands very easily with light grit paper. We're not going to hit it with anything heavy, maybe 120 and finish it off lightly with 220. And it should just be a one-time thing. It'll come out pretty well perfect like this. It'll look, when we're done, it's going to look like glass. Now that we're done with the wing, the next step I like to go on to is shaping the fuselage. In the past, I used to put profile templates in with the kits. Found that the majority of people didn't like them, didn't use them. So I stopped doing that. Began to offer pre-shaped kits. So any of these kits that are from me are available pre-shaped, and that's on the website. I can do it for you. They're really not that hard to do. They are a little time consuming, and there are a couple techniques that you can do to make it easy. And at that point, once you learn how to do this, so it opens up a whole lot of possibilities for scratch building and all kinds of other things that you might want to do. This is what I do, this being a 60-inch P51. What I find to be the most helpful for me in shaping is seeing something that's three-dimensional. I'm making a three-dimensional object. I want to see something three-dimensional. I start off with just a 3-view of a P51. I usually like to print out a picture of something to inspire me as I go. You know, this is here, the Valhalla. I may or may not do this color scheme, but I want to do that as I go. So I'm going to just have this here handy to look at as I shape. The other thing that I do with every kit that I make, if it's available, I buy just a plastic model. This one here is just what the Revell P51. I don't even bother putting them together, but as I begin to shape, I can have all the parts and pieces here. These are done pretty well exactly to scale, and I can hold that up to the body, get the general shape that I'm looking for, and just begin to shape from this. And at this point, when I'm done, I just throw it back in the box. I'm done. So let me give you a couple hints and tips on this as we go. Keep this out handy. As with on the wings, cutting the channel for the extra spar, one of the most important things when you're carving is to hold the knife at a 45-degree angle and draw it through. Don't hold it flush and just pull it straight in. Even with a brand new blade, it will chunk and it'll not cut the phone clean. Also, one of the things, unless you're extremely familiar with the way these are shaped, don't cut too much off at a time, but also don't be afraid to shape it. Most of the time, a lot of guys will just leave these too square. You know, when I make a fuselage, it may not be exact scale, but it's very close. And you can usually take it to look pretty much like the original airplane it was designed after. Just don't be afraid of it. Get it close with your blade. At that point, we're going to switch over to a sanding block and paper, take it down the rest of the way. And I'm going to show you a couple other things that I use in helping bring the profiles in. So on this, I'm going to go ahead and start. What I do on the spinner, I can take, actually I want to take this scoop off here now too. I'm going to do this last. But on the spinner, you want the spinner to be pretty round. And I know the spinner starts right after the air intake on a P-51. And again, looking at a 3-view or a model, you're going to know right where your spinner starts in relationship to some part of the body. And I know that the spinner, no matter what plane, was perfectly round. I'm going to attempt to get it as close to round as possible. So what I do is I go ahead and make a mark right here. I just take it, cut through, and I'm going to cut and just make an indentation here down. And one thing I didn't touch on earlier, keep a hammer around. As things begin to get frustrating, you can beat it, you can knock yourself out, you can do all kinds of stuff with it. On the other sense, get back to the cutting. Again, like I said, all we're going to do, I'm going to create a relief cut so I can begin to shape. I do that on the bottom. Usually the shape of the spinner up on top, depending on the airplane, I might cut that relief cut. The P-51 has a slight indentation where the engine cowling comes down to meet the nose cone. I'm not going to put a relief cut on there because I'm going to bring that in with the sandpaper. So I like to cut, like I said, I cut a little bit at a time. I don't want to cut too much, but I'm not afraid to do it either. If you just work it, I mean, the thing is, this is EPP. If we do make a mistake, if we cut too much, we can either glue it back in or we are going to fill it back in with spackle. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity here to fix a mistake if it does happen. Ultimately, you don't want to try to do it, but if it happens, it's not the end of the world. So just begin to work it. And we just want to, as we're roughing it right now, all we want to do is get it close. Again, if, like on this nose here, what I did, and I don't know if you can see exactly, but I know that the shape of the P-51 goes from a slight, it's nearly square on the side with a very slight angle, and then it transitions over to round. So as I began to drag the knife, I began to twist it over to the 45 degrees because I want to bring this down into round. So I don't want to take too much off though until I begin to get close to what I'm after. I always like to just eye it down to see where I'm at. Periodically, what I'm going to do, I'm also going to check it with the model and look at the 3-view just to see how I'm doing. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. The whole time, what you want to try to achieve also, at least what I like to do, I like to work with symmetry. In other words, some guys will try to shape one side and then match it to the other. If that works for you, it's great. For me, it doesn't work as well. What I like to do is just one side, to the next and work it as I go. That way, for me at least, I get a better feel, I guess is one way of saying it, for the model as I'm doing it. I begin to know when I take too much off or something like that. It becomes very obvious when something's going on. One other thing, keep a stack of blades handy, because it's not uncommon to use 2 or 3 brand new blades in just shaping one body. The EPP is very abrasive. It doesn't dissipate heat, so all it's doing is just dulling the blade out. Okay, as this is starting to get close here, I'm going to get, as it goes, I'm going to check with the model. I just happen to know this little piece here shows the way the scoop is. The scoop on the bottom was kind of oval, but about 2/3 overall width of the nose cone. So again, I'm just going to go with that. So I'm just going to start to take it into that, and it has kind of a smile face on it for this plane, just to show off here, to give a quick little view what it's like. And again, I'm just checking for symmetry, even though I'm, obviously far from being done. I like to keep it as close to even as possible as I go. Now we're at the stage where I've whittled the majority of what I want off with the blade off, and at this point I'm going to take over with the sandpaper, sanding block, and I also, on the sides of these airplanes, to be able to achieve the taper that these airplanes had, what I find works really well, for me at least, is an orbital palm sander. I have this Porter Cable one. I use 100 grit paper on it. I don't want to go with the heavier grit paper. It has a tendency to want to tear if you use the heavier grit paper with the palm sander. So going with a little lighter weight works. Also, one of the things you want to keep, if you're going to even consider using something like this, is you don't ever want to catch an edge. You want to keep this thing as flat as possible on the body. If you get it up on edge at all you're going to do is just, no matter what type of paper, just rip out a half-moon chunk of foam, and at that point you're filling, and it's not a lot of work to redo something that was looking really nice. So here's the way I do it. As you can see, just even in that short amount of time, I began to bring the taper in, even though the P-51 had just a very gentle taper. Other planes like the ME-109 and some other ones have quite an extreme taper up from the wing all the way up to the canopy. This is just very subtle. All I'm doing is just applying a little bit more pressure up at the top, allowing the paper to do the work, and just going from there. What I'm going to do, when I do anything with this palm sander, it's never to the finished product. It's going to be getting it roughed out, and then everything that I'm going to do finishing up is going to be on a sanding block and then by hand. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on this for a second. We're going to pop back here when it's done and show you the finishing techniques. Here's just a little tip. For a sanding block, what I find works really well, just a scrap piece of EPP. I make it approximately the same length as an 8 or 8.5 inches, so I can tear an 8.5 by 11 sheet of sandpaper out in half. I like to leave one edge square and then put a half or quarter round angle on the other side. And it's just a real simple process to get this to stick. It's a little Super 7.7 on the paper, and let it set 10-15 seconds, and apply it right down to the foam and begin to use it. Instant sanding block. The majority of this has just been working it back and forth, always trying to keep your sanding motion, always going either at a 45-degree angle or flush with the length of the sandpaper, trying to avoid at a minimum going just straight with the paper, and that'll leave a groove. So again, I'm just going to kind of go over the way I do it, keeping everything at a 45-degree angle. Working it as I go. We're going to get down from here. We're going to finish it up by hand here in a second. But it's beginning to take all the shape that we're after. So it's coming very close. Again, checking for symmetry the entire time. You can see that I'm just a little high here on the engine cowl. A lot of times when there's something not exactly square or symmetrical, it doesn't take a whole lot of sanding to get it to look just right. Sometimes it's just a matter of a few quick and easy passes, and it'll come into play. Okay, now I'm going to show you how I finish up by hand. What I do is I just have a piece of 100 grit here. I like to fold over the edges. And the reason I do that is just because of the way I've become accustomed to holding it. When I hold the paper in my hand, I like to hold it between my thumb and forefinger, I guess, and my pinky and ring finger. And I just create a little pocket here, and that allows, with my fingers, I can form to the shape that I'm after and allow the paper tension to then give myself a real nice curve. The reason I fold these over, one time I was going at it pretty vigorously and just had the rough edge of the paper, and it slipped and came across the inside of my pinky and cut it down real bad. It was a red piece of foam. I try to avoid that now, and just that works very well. One tip that I want to be able to give you is on getting your spinner round. I find that using 100 grit paper, again holding it the way I like to hold it, I bring it in onto the foam where I've got it wrapped, and I don't try to put a lot of pressure. What I'm going to try to do is create a half round circle with the foam and allow it to be stiff by just pulling pressure on it and holding it so it's consistently touching the palm of my hand. And I use it and I just work it very gently back and forth. I don't try to put a lot of pressure on. I want the paper to do the work and just hit the high points until I begin to get that spinner round. Once the spinner becomes round, at this point I work it around the entire fuse. And as it becomes round, you're going to be able to put more pressure on all the way down. And then you'll be able to then form this down into a smaller cone and work the rest of the spinner down. Again, referring to any drawings or pictures you have to get the correct shape. But this one here, we've already worked it. We've got the spinner nearly perfectly round. Probably the only way of doing it would be to cut it off, chuck it up in on a drill press and actually spin it. But then I don't like to cut it off and re-glue it back on. To me, that's not an option. I'm going to go ahead and make it as round as I can on the plane and go from there. You can see on the spinner here, everything's gentle. When you're sanding, let the paper do the work for you. Don't put too much pressure on it. The paper will cut the foam. It's not that bad. One of the things, same thing with the paper. I try to move everything in a 45-degree angle. I never try to go straight in line with the fuse because that's going to give me lines on the fuse. So everything's trying to keep it around symmetrical angle. Up here on the spinner, I can see I had a small little line there. We'll go ahead and just try to work that off. And you can see here, the basic shape of the fuse now is done. All I have to do now is finish bringing in the bottom scoop. I left this off just because I kind of hit it a couple times to get a general idea of shaping it. But what I want to do is I like to take this and actually hold it up in place where it's going to sit on the body. And I like to take my pin and just kind of put a really quick line on the edge of this foam. And that way I've got a mark of where I want to cut it at. I'm going to begin to shape this down, and I'm going to shape it to match. Now the P51 was a little bit more square right at the bottom of the scoop and then flattened out at the front. I don't make the scoop perfectly scale for the simple fact we're flying slope planes. They're landing on their bellies in rough terrain. If we were to make the scoop a lot closer to scale, it'd be ripped off after a flight or two. So let's make it look good and make it very functional for what we're after. As we do this, I just want to keep checking it for fit to get close. And then we'll just be finishing it up with the sanding block. The fuse is all shaped. Everything's fit. Now we're going to be laying in the gear.